Sarah Whitman stood at the edge of her kitchen window, her fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Beyond the glass, the late September sun slanted across the trees, setting their leaves ablaze in amber and gold. The world looked calm, but Sarah's mind was a storm. Her daughter Emma sat at the table behind her, scrolling absently through her phone. The dark circles under Emma's eyes made her seem older than her 27 years. Only 6 months had passed since the divorce papers were signed, but Sarah knew the damage had started long before that. 7 years in a loveless marriage had left Emma fragile, like porcelain that had been glued together too many times. Sarah's thoughts kept circling back to her sister, Linda. For most of Sarah's life, Linda had been a force of nature, glamorous, opinionated, always certain she knew what was best for everyone. When Ryan, Linda's son, had shown interest in Emma, Linda's voice had carried the weight of prophecy. "This is the best thing for her, Sarah. Ryan will take care of her. Their families belong together." Sarah had hesitated back then. Emma was just 19, shy and bright, with dreams of studying art in New York. But Linda's arguments had been relentless, sweetened by promises of security and whispered warnings about how dangerous the world is for young girls. Sarah, widowed and anxious, had convinced herself Linda was right. Now, watching Emma's pale face in the morning light, Sarah felt the bitter aftertaste of regret. Emma looked up. "Mom? You're staring." Sarah forced a smile. "Just thinking. How's your coffee?" Emma shrugged. "Fine." Silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words neither dared to speak. Sarah wanted to ask about the nightmares Emma sometimes mentioned, flashes of arguments, Ryan's sharp voice, the way he'd controlled everything from her wardrobe to the friends she kept. But she knew Emma needed time, not questions. Later that afternoon, Sarah drove to the farmer's market, seeking solace in the simple ritual of picking fresh apples and pumpkins. There, she ran into Mrs. Foster, an old family friend. After some polite chatter, Mrs. Foster lowered her voice. "Sarah, have you spoken to Linda recently?" "Not since the divorce," Sarah replied cautiously. Mrs. Foster's brows knitted. "I probably shouldn't say this, but Linda's been bragging about how she handled Emma's marriage. She said she convinced you because she wanted Ryan to settle down before he ruined the family business." Sarah's pulse quickened. "She said that?" Mrs. Foster nodded. "I thought you knew." Driving home, Sarah replayed the conversation over and over. So Linda's advice hadn't been about love or stability at all, it had been about control. About keeping Ryan from drifting too far from the family fortune. By the time Sarah reached her driveway, her regret had transformed into something sharper. She thought of all the times Linda had dismissed Emma's struggles as growing pains, all the smug smiles whenever Ryan paraded Emma at family events like a trophy. Sarah sat in the car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel. She could hear Linda's voice in her head, smooth and commanding. "You just need to be firm with Emma. She'll adjust." No more, Sarah thought. She wouldn't allow Linda's arrogance to define Emma's future, or her own. That evening, she opened an old notebook and began to write. Not a diary, but a ledger, every slight, every manipulation, every piece of gossip Linda had spread over the years. Sarah didn't yet know what she would do with this list, only that she needed to remember it all. Emma poked her head into the living room. "What are you working on?" Sarah closed the notebook halfway. "Just organizing some thoughts." Emma smiled faintly, the first real smile Sarah had seen in days. "Good. Maybe we can organize my studio next week." "Of course," Sarah said, softening. She would help Emma rebuild, brick by brick, but she would also make sure Linda answered for what she'd done, and somewhere, deep inside, Sarah felt the first stirrings of resolve. Revenge, if it came, wouldn't be about cruelty. It would be about justice. About teaching her sister that families weren't pawns in a game. Emma had once believed in fairy tales, not the kind with dragons and castles, but the quieter sort, where love meant safety and a home filled with laughter. Ryan had seemed like the embodiment of that dream the summer she met him. It had been at Linda's lake house, during a 4th of July party. Sarah remembered the way Ryan appeared on the dock, sunlight bouncing off the water behind him. He was handsome, confident, a year older than Emma and already working in Linda's family business. Linda had hovered nearby, introducing him with a smile that suggested she'd been planning this moment for months. "He's solid," Linda whispered later, as the young people played volleyball on the beach. "Not like those boys in New York Emma keeps talking about." At first, Ryan was solid, attentive, charming, quick to praise Emma's sketches and her easy laugh. He offered to drive her home from her summer job, brought her small gifts, and filled her phone with affectionate messages. By the time autumn rolled around, Emma was swept up in a whirlwind of dinners, late-night calls, and promises whispered under starlit skies. When Ryan proposed, Emma hesitated. She was only 19, with a scholarship waiting at an art institute. She mentioned this to her mother, but Sarah, still raw from losing her husband, wanted Emma to be protected. And Linda, with her ever-confident voice, tipped the scale. "This is your chance to give Emma stability," Linda said over coffee one morning. "Ryan adores her. He'll give her everything she needs." Sarah had looked at her sister then, searching for sincerity. Linda's smile was warm, reassuring, almost maternal. That smile hid everything Sarah didn't yet understand. The wedding was small but elegant. Sarah remembered how radiant Emma looked in her ivory gown, her eyes bright with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Ryan, in a tailored navy suit, held her hands with a steadiness that seemed to promise forever. Guests clapped, cameras flashed, and Linda stood nearby, her satisfaction evident in the slight upturn of her lips. For a while, Emma seemed happy. She and Ryan moved into a charming townhouse on the edge of the city. Sarah visited often, bringing groceries or helping Emma decorate. Ryan was courteous, always thanking Sarah for her help. But there were small cracks Sarah couldn't quite name, the way Ryan corrected Emma in front of guests, or how Emma's laughter sometimes stopped abruptly when Ryan entered the room. The cracks widened after Emma gave up her art scholarship. Ryan said traveling to New York every week would distract her from family life. He bought her an expensive set of paints as consolation, but Emma rarely used them. Sarah noticed her daughter's canvases gathering dust in the spare room. Over the years, Ryan's criticisms sharpened. He found fault in Emma's cooking, her clothes, even her friends. "I just want you to be the best version of yourself," he'd say, a smile softening the sting of his words. Emma began shrinking, her once bright confidence dimming until she was careful with every word. Whenever Sarah raised concerns, Linda brushed them aside. "Marriage isn't easy," she'd say, sipping wine on her patio. "Emma just needs to learn how to keep Ryan happy." By the 5th year, Emma rarely came home without Ryan. When she did, she was quiet, distracted, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. One evening, Sarah caught a glimpse of bruises along Emma's wrist as she reached for a cup of tea. Emma quickly pulled her sleeve down, murmuring something about bumping into a door. Sarah's heart clenched, but Emma insisted she was fine. She wouldn't explain, and Ryan's polite facade remained intact whenever Sarah visited. The breaking point came on a rainy February night, nearly 7 years into their marriage. Emma showed up at Sarah's doorstep, soaked through and shaking. Her suitcase, hastily packed, sagged against her side. "He said I don't make him happy anymore," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "He wants a divorce." Sarah drew her daughter inside, wrapping her in a blanket. She made tea, sat Emma on the couch, and listened as Emma finally spoke, about the controlling words, the arguments, the loneliness of living with someone who only loved the image of her. By the time Emma finished, Sarah felt a cold fury settle deep inside her chest. She wanted to march over to Ryan's apartment, to scream at him for what he'd done, but she knew anger alone wouldn't heal Emma's wounds. The divorce process was quick but painful. Ryan's lawyers kept things clinical, ensuring Emma left with little more than her clothes and a small settlement. Through it all, Linda's stance remained maddeningly neutral. "These things happen," she said once, as if 7 years of her niece's suffering were a mere inconvenience. That comment was the final seed of doubt Sarah needed. Something about Linda's indifference, her lack of remorse, her quiet smugness, hinted at a deeper truth. Sarah began to look back at every conversation, every push Linda had made toward the marriage. And slowly, the pattern emerged: Linda's constant insistence, her eagerness to tie Emma to Ryan, the way she'd boasted about the match to friends. Emma, exhausted, fell asleep on the couch that night. Sarah stood by the window again, watching the rain streak the glass. She realized then that her sister hadn't simply given bad advice. Linda had engineered this entire disaster for her own reasons, and Sarah, once so trusting, now understood. Linda would not change unless someone forced her to face the damage she'd done. The morning after Emma collapsed on her couch, Sarah awoke before dawn. The house was still, except for the steady tick of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. She tiptoed past the sofa where Emma slept, wrapped in a blanket. Her face soft with the exhaustion that follows grief. Sarah brewed a pot of coffee, then sat at the kitchen table with her notebook, the one she had begun filling with small details of Linda's meddling. She turned the pages slowly, rereading what she'd written the night before, the comments Linda made about Ryan being a solid investment, the way she dismissed Emma's tears as childish. The subtle manipulations Sarah had once mistaken for sisterly guidance. Why had she trusted Linda so completely? Maybe it was because Linda always sounded so certain, while Sarah often second-guessed herself. After Sarah's husband died, Linda stepped into the void with advice on everything: how to handle bills, how to raise Emma, even how to dress for job interviews. Sarah had mistaken control for support. She looked at Emma, still sleeping peacefully, and felt a rush of protectiveness. Emma deserved more than pity. She deserved a future unclouded by Linda's interference. Later that week, Sarah drove across town to return a casserole dish Linda had left months earlier. Linda answered the door wearing a tailored blazer, her hair styled as if for a magazine shoot. She welcomed Sarah with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I wasn't expecting you," Linda said, ushering her inside. The house smelled faintly of expensive candles and lemon polish. Family photos lined the mantel: Ryan as a child, Linda at charity galas, Ryan and Emma on their wedding day, smiling. Oblivious. "I thought I'd drop this off," Sarah replied, placing the dish on the counter. She hesitated, studying her sister. "How are you?" Linda shrugged elegantly. "Busy as always. Ryan's adjusting to single life. Honestly, I think the divorce was for the best. Emma was never cut out for? Well, for someone like him." The casual cruelty of those words stole Sarah's breath. She set her hands flat on the counter to steady herself. "Emma gave up everything for him," she said quietly. Linda waved a manicured hand. "Oh, please. She'll bounce back. Young women always do. Anyway, Ryan needs to focus on the company now, and this frees him." Something in Sarah hardened. She excused herself quickly, unwilling to let Linda see her anger. As she drove home, the conversation replayed in her mind, each word sharpening her resolve. That evening, Sarah spoke carefully to Emma, asking gentle questions. Emma revealed fragments of the past, how Linda had often pressured her to make Ryan happy, how she'd felt trapped between disappointing her aunt and losing herself entirely. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked softly. Emma looked down at her tea. "You trusted her so much. I thought. Maybe I was overreacting." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. "You were never overreacting." After Emma went to bed, Sarah opened her laptop. She began researching Linda's business ventures, reading news articles, scrolling through community boards. She discovered Linda chaired several committees, invested in local startups, and cultivated an image as a philanthropist. That image depended on spotless reputation and discretion about her family's affairs. Sarah wasn't sure yet what form her revenge would take. She only knew she wanted it to be measured, deliberate. She wanted Linda to feel the quiet, suffocating pressure Emma had lived under, but without harming Emma or herself. She made a list: gather evidence of Linda's manipulation, support Emma's independence, help her find work, rebuild confidence, watch for Linda's weak spots, pride, reputation, control over Ryan. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. She wasn't powerless anymore. She had direction. The next day, she accompanied Emma to a small art gallery downtown. The owner, a warm woman named Claire, admired Emma's portfolio and offered her a spot in a spring exhibition. Emma's face lit up with cautious hope. Sarah silently vowed to nurture that hope, no matter how long it took. On the drive home, Sarah glanced at Emma, who was gazing out the window, the sunlight softening the lines of worry on her face. That moment crystallized Sarah's purpose. She would protect her daughter's fragile new beginning while ensuring Linda could no longer play puppeteer. That night, Sarah sat by the window again, pen in hand. She wrote in her notebook, "Justice is not loud. It is steady, patient, and certain." The words felt right. They tasted of steel and quiet fire. For years, Linda had treated life like a chessboard, moving Emma and Ryan as pieces to fortify her own standing. But chess required foresight, and Sarah, at last, was learning to see several moves ahead. She closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and allowed herself the smallest smile. The game had begun. Sarah spent the next several days moving carefully, as if balancing two worlds: the quiet cocoon she was weaving around Emma, and the shadowy plan forming in her own mind. Emma's energy was beginning to return. She filled a corner of the living room with canvases and tubes of paint, and sometimes Sarah caught her humming while she worked. Sarah made sure there were healthy meals in the fridge, flowers on the table, and encouraging words whenever Emma's confidence wavered. But at night, when Emma slept, Sarah sat with her notebook, shaping a strategy. Revenge, she decided, couldn't be impulsive. Linda thrived on control. To defeat her, Sarah needed patience and precision. The first step was information. Sarah began calling old acquaintances, people who had worked with Linda on committees, neighbors who'd once admired her polished perfection. She asked casual questions, listening more than she spoke. From these conversations, a pattern emerged. Linda's reputation was immaculate but fragile. She guarded her image fiercely, sometimes stepping on others to maintain it. Sarah highlighted a note in her ledger: "Linda fears exposure more than loss." Next came allies. Sarah remembered Mrs. Foster from the farmer's market, who had hinted at Linda's bragging. Over tea, Mrs. Foster confessed she wasn't surprised by Emma's ordeal. "Linda's always had a way of making everything about herself," she said. "People tolerate it because she looks generous at fundraisers. But plenty of folks resent her." Sarah also sought out Daniel, a quiet accountant who'd once worked for Linda's company. Over lunch, he revealed that Linda sometimes blurred ethical lines with her investments. Nothing criminal, but enough that she wouldn't want headlines sniffing around still. Sarah wasn't looking to ruin Linda financially. That would only feed Linda's narrative of being a victim of jealousy. Sarah wanted something subtler, to peel back the polished surface and show people the truth. Meanwhile, she poured energy into Emma's future. She helped her daughter set up an online portfolio, encouraged her to join an art collective, and quietly arranged for an old friend in marketing to commission a mural from her. Every small success added a spark to Emma's eyes, a glow Sarah hadn't seen since Emma was a teenager. One chilly afternoon, Sarah invited Claire, the gallery owner, over for coffee. They spoke of Emma's exhibition, but Claire also shared how Linda once tried to pressure the gallery into featuring Ryan's photography, though he had little talent. She expected us to showcase him because of her donations, Claire said. We declined, and she stopped contributing. Sarah made another note: Linda trades generosity for control. That evening, Sarah reread her growing list: guard Emma's progress. Don't let Linda undermine it. Build a quiet network of people who've seen Linda's real nature. Document Linda's schemes, dates, words, witnesses. Wait for the right moment. Sometimes she wondered if she was overstepping, if revenge was clouding her judgment. But then she remembered Emma's trembling hands the night she arrived home, the years stolen from her by a marriage designed to serve someone else's ego. Justice, Sarah reminded herself, was not cruelty. It was balance. The perfect opportunity began to take shape when Sarah learned of an upcoming gala Linda was chairing, a charity auction drawing the city's most influential figures. Linda planned to unveil a new scholarship fund that night, cementing her reputation as a selfless benefactor. Sarah decided the gala would be the stage for her sister's unmasking. But she would not humiliate Linda with wild accusations. Instead, she would reveal evidence of Linda's manipulation, carefully, irrefutably, in front of those who mattered most to her. To prepare, Sarah gathered proof, texts Linda had sent over the years, pushing Emma toward Ryan. Notes from friends who'd overheard Linda bragging about steering the marriage. Even a voicemail in which Linda dismissed Emma's distress as a phase. Each piece went into a folder, neat and precise. At the same time, Sarah coached Emma to handle any encounter with Linda gracefully. You don't owe her explanations, Sarah said gently one night. If she tries to pull you back, stay calm. You have every right to protect your peace. Emma nodded, though hesitation flickered in her eyes. I don't want a fight. There won't be a fight, Sarah promised. Just truth. By the end of the week, Sarah felt a steadiness she hadn't known since before Emma's wedding. She was no longer the uncertain widow clinging to her sister's advice. She was a mother reclaiming her voice, a woman ready to hold another accountable. On the night before the gala, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, folder open, notebook beside her. She reviewed everything one last time, then closed it with deliberate care. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Emma slept upstairs, safe. Sarah allowed herself a long breath. Revenge wasn't about destroying Linda. It was about freeing Emma, and herself, from a web spun years ago. Tomorrow, that web would begin to unravel. The night of the gala dawned crisp and clear, a sliver of moon hanging over the city like a silver hook. Sarah slipped into a navy dress, simple but elegant, and pinned a small pearl brooch to her lapel, her late husband's gift from their first anniversary. It felt like a quiet talisman. Emma emerged from her room in a soft rose gown, her hair swept up loosely. There was a tremor in her hands as she fastened her bracelet. Sarah took them gently. You look beautiful, she said. Remember, we're here to enjoy the evening. Nothing else. Emma nodded, though Sarah could see the unease behind her smile. The gala venue was a historic hall, its chandeliers spilling golden light over polished floors. Guests mingled near tables draped with white linen, glasses of champagne in hand. At the center of it all stood Linda, immaculate in emerald silk, her laughter carrying across the room like a bell. She welcomed donors with practiced warmth, her eyes scanning for opportunities. Sarah guided Emma toward a quiet corner near an art display. She let her daughter settle with a glass of sparkling water before weaving through the crowd herself, greeting acquaintances and dropping small, measured remarks. "Linda always has a plan," she told Mrs. Foster with a knowing smile. "Remember how she insisted Emma and Ryan were a perfect match? I've been revisiting those old conversations." Mrs. Foster raised her brows. "So you've noticed too?" Soon, other whispers stirred. Claire mentioned Linda's attempt to strong-arm her gallery. Daniel, the accountant, spoke softly about Linda's heavy-handed tactics in business. Sarah never pushed too far. She simply allowed people to connect the dots they'd long suspected. At the auction table, Sarah arranged the folder of evidence inside her clutch. She felt its weight like a heartbeat. She wasn't sure whether she would need to show it tonight or if planting quiet truths would be enough. Either way, she was ready. Midway through the evening, Linda mounted the stage, her smile radiant as she introduced the scholarship fund. Applause rippled across the hall. She spoke about generosity, about helping young talent find their wings. Sarah almost laughed at the irony. When the speeches ended, Linda approached Sarah and Emma, champagne in hand. "You both look lovely," she said, her tone sweet but her eyes assessing. "Emma, I hope you're doing better. Ryan tells me he's thriving." Emma's shoulders stiffened. Sarah stepped forward, calm but firm. "Emma's thriving too," she said. "She's focusing on her art, and on people who value her." Linda blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Of course," she replied, recovering with a smile. "I only ever wanted what was best for her." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "That's not how it felt for Emma. Or for me." Linda's smile faltered. "Sarah, this isn't the place." "On the contrary," Sarah said softly, leaning closer so only Linda could hear. "This is exactly the place. All these people admire you. They deserve to know how you've treated your family." Linda's fingers tightened on her glass. "You wouldn't dare." "I don't need to shout," Sarah replied, voice even. "I've already shared pieces of the story. They're starting to see you as I do." For the first time, Linda's mask slipped. Her mouth tightened, and her gaze flicked toward a cluster of guests nearby: Claire, Mrs. Foster, Daniel, all watching with polite curiosity. Sarah smiled faintly. "Don't worry, I won't embarrass you tonight. I just wanted you to understand, your control ends here." Linda opened her mouth, then closed it again, her composure fraying at the edges. She excused herself hastily, retreating toward the stage. Emma touched Sarah's arm. "What happened?" "Nothing you need to worry about," Sarah said gently. "Just a conversation." For the rest of the evening, Sarah stayed close to Emma, introducing her to supportive patrons who admired her upcoming exhibition. She made sure Linda saw Emma laughing with new allies, no longer a pawn but a person reclaiming her place. By the time the gala wound down, Linda's laughter had grown brittle, her charm strained. Sarah could feel the shift. People had begun looking at Linda not as an untouchable hostess but as someone with cracks in her glass facade. As they left, Emma leaned against Sarah, tired but content. "You were amazing tonight," she murmured. Sarah kissed her forehead. "So were you." Driving home, Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't needed to brandish every piece of evidence. The truth was already working its way through the room like water through stone. Eroding Linda's carefully built walls, the real victory wasn't in destroying her sister, It was in showing Emma that neither Linda nor Ryan held the power to define her anymore. When they reached the house, Emma went upstairs to change. Sarah lingered in the kitchen, setting her clutch on the counter. She opened it, looking at the folder inside. There were still pages she hadn't used, and might never need. Sometimes, she realized, the threat of exposure was more potent than exposure itself. She closed the folder and slid it into a drawer. The night had been enough. For the first time in years, Sarah felt light, as if she'd stepped out from under a long shadow. Justice wasn't a loud reckoning. It was the steady, unshakable knowledge that she had protected her daughter, and reclaimed her own strength. The week after the gala felt different in subtle but unmistakable ways. Sarah sensed it when she visited the cafe near Emma's studio and overheard a pair of patrons discussing the event. Linda looked rattled, one of them said, stirring her coffee. It's like the shine wore off a little. About time, the other replied. She's pushed people around for years. Sarah sipped her tea quietly, allowing herself a small, private smile. The cracks she'd planted in Linda's facade were spreading on their own. Emma, meanwhile, bloomed. She spent long hours painting at the studio, her brush strokes looser, bolder. When she came home, her cheeks were flushed with a life Sarah hadn't seen since before the marriage. She spoke excitedly about her upcoming exhibition and about a class she wanted to teach for local teens. I feel like I'm starting over, Emma said one evening, curling up on the sofa with a mug of cocoa. And this time it's on my terms. That's exactly where you should be, Sarah replied, smoothing her daughter's hair, but Sarah knew one final thread still dangled. Linda had retreated at the gala, but silence from her was rarely a good sign. If Sarah wanted to ensure Emma's freedom, she needed to make it clear that Linda's reign over their lives was truly finished. So, a few days later, Sarah arranged to meet her sister at a quiet bistro. The winter sun slanted through frosted windows as Sarah slid into a booth opposite Linda, who arrived draped in a wool coat. Her expression guarded. I don't appreciate being ambushed at that gala, Linda began. Voice low but sharp, Sarah met her gaze steadily. I didn't ambush you. I told you the truth. You steered Emma into a marriage that hurt her, and you did it for your own convenience. Linda scoffed. That's absurd. I was trying to help. Help? Sarah leaned forward. You convinced a grieving widow and a 19-year-old girl to give up her dreams, just so your son wouldn't embarrass you or wander from the family business. You wanted control, and you used us to get it. For a moment, Linda said nothing. Her eyes flicked to the folder Sarah had set on the table, slim, but heavy with implication. You wouldn't really share that, Linda said quietly. Sarah let the silence stretch before answering. I don't need to, unless you give me a reason. I'm not here to humiliate you, Linda. I'm here to tell you that Emma is off limits. No more interference, no more subtle digs or pressure. If you want a relationship with us, it'll be on honest terms. Linda's shoulders slumped slightly. You think you're so righteous, she murmured, but the edge in her tone had dulled. I'm not righteous, Sarah replied. I'm a mother who finally stopped letting you dictate her life. A long pause settled between them. Linda looked down, twisting her napkin. For the first time in years, she seemed unsure of herself. I didn't mean for Emma to get hurt, she said, almost reluctantly. Maybe not, Sarah allowed. But you refused to see her pain because it didn't fit the picture you wanted. That's on you. Linda drew a breath, then set her napkin aside. I suppose I owe her an apology. You owe her space, Sarah said gently. And respect. When they parted, there was no embrace, only a nod, heavy with unspoken understanding. Sarah watched Linda walk down the snowy street. Her usual brisk stride softened by something like humility. That evening, Sarah returned home to find Emma sprawled on the rug. sorting through framed pieces for the exhibition. She looked up, smiling. How did it go? Sarah placed her coat on the hook and sat beside her daughter. We had an honest talk, she said. I don't know if she'll ever change completely, but she understands she can't use us anymore. Emma studied her for a moment, then leaned against her shoulder. Thank you, Mom. Sarah wrapped an arm around her. You don't need to thank me. I should have protected you sooner. But I promise, from here on, we're building a life that belongs only to us. The following weekend, Emma's art opening drew a lively crowd. Paintings lined the gallery walls, vivid with color and strength. Sarah stood in the back, heart swelling as she watched Emma speak to patrons, her voice clear and steady. Linda attended too, lingering near the entrance. She offered polite praise but kept her distance, as if sensing the new boundaries drawn around Emma's life. When the evening ended, Emma sold several pieces and received an invitation to join a collective in another city. The glow in her eyes was pure, unshadowed. As they walked home beneath a canopy of stars, Sarah felt the weight of the past 7 years lifting. Revenge, she realized, hadn't been about destroying Linda. It had been about reclaiming power, for herself, for Emma, and ensuring that the chains Linda had forged could never bind them again. And back at the house, Sarah poured 2 cups of tea. She and Emma sat by the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. To new beginnings, Emma said, raising her mug. Sarah smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. To freedom, she answered. Outside, the night was still and calm, a world waiting to be written anew. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah believed that she and her daughter truly held the pen.